Hello and good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Lucy Raven and I'm an associate professor at the Cooper Union School of Art. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you all virtually today for this exciting conversation as part of our fall 2021 season of Public Art Fund talks at the Cooper Union. We're so thrilled to be going on our 4th year of hosting this series, which includes online and in-person talks presented in conjunction with New York City exhibitions. This series aims at broadening dialogue around the social and cultural contexts of art making and creative practices by connecting the public with internationally renowned artists like the one you'll meet in just a few moments. My deepest thanks to Public Art Fund, an organization that shares with the Cooper Union a commitment to the civic life of New York City and to democratizing access to art and art education. We're so thankful for our ongoing partnership with them in making these events possible. It's my pleasure to welcome our featured artist, Claudia Wieser, whose newest solo exhibition, Rehearsal, marks her first ever foray into the domain of public art. We are also joined by Katerina Stathopoulou, Associate Curator at Public Art Fund. Katerina will introduce Claudia and will be moderating this afternoon's talk. In addition to her curatorial work with Rehearsal, Katerina's most recent projects include solo exhibitions with Gillian Waring, Farah Al-Qasimi, and Martine Gutierrez. Thank you all once again, and Katerina, I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. We're really grateful to have you here today to introduce this event. In addition to being an associate professor at Cooper Union, you're also an artist that we all admire at Public Art Fund deeply. So we're very grateful that you're here with us today. And thank you to everybody who's joining us virtually today. It's, one of the outcomes of the pandemic is that we've all learned to communicate, via Zoom virtually, and we're able to have Claudia today here from her Berlin studio. Public Art Fund talks are organized in collaboration with Cooper Union. Our goal is to connect compelling contemporary artists to a broad public by establishing a dialogue about artistic practices and public art. Public Art Fund is physically based in Manhattan. So I'd like to begin by offering our respect and gratitude to the Lenape people, acknowledging that our offices and projects stand on the ancestral homeland of Lenapehoking. So we're thrilled to have Claudia here today, joining from Berlin. We had the pleasure of having Claudia in New York for 20 days in July when we were installing Rehearsal. And now after a long break, we have the opportunity to connect with her again to hear more about her practice and specifically Rehearsal. So since we're doing this event on Zoom, closed captioning is available. And also we would like to encourage you to ask questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And once Claudia finishes her presentation about her practice, and we can engage in a dialogue with her. So please, we encourage your questions and look forward to hearing from you. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the donors that generously support our talks programs, specifically Con Edison, the New York State Council of the Arts, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and Public Art Fund's incredible board. We're grateful for your ongoing support and that enable us to do these free public programs. We're also grateful to all the donors and supporters of Claudia's show, which you saw in the intro slides, and specifically including the presenting sponsor, Bloomberg Philanthropies. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of Claudia's practice before I give her the floor. Claudia's work is deeply influenced by 20th century modernism, and which she has interpreted and reinterpreted in her own visual style and palette. Her geometric constructions are inspired by the Bauhaus, specifically in terms of architecture and design, and are also influenced by spirituality. Hopefully you've all had the chance to see Claudia's work at Brooklyn Bridge Park. It's located at the Main Street Plaza at the Plymouth Street entrance to Brooklyn Bridge Park, where the iconic vista of the Manhattan Bridge, where it frames the Empire State Building, can be seen. So without further ado, I'll give you Claudia.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining today the talk. I will now share my screen. So I will shortly talk, first of all, I will talk about the commission we did together with Public Art Fund. Then I will talk or give you a little overview over my work of the past, about of shows and also single works, and then I will come back to the Public Art Fund Commission. I think I want to mention a few more things about me. I've studied art in Munich, painting actually, and I made before that an apprenticeship as a blacksmith. So I worked with materials in my hands for 4 years. And during I studied art, I also made set designs in films, which I think is very important for my later practice. Now we come to the commission, or the Public Art Fund work, which is in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And it's, as you can see, there are 5 large sculptures. And it was not easy to decide which size they actually have, because you have this monumental bridge in the back and also big houses around it and the skyline of New York. And then, of course, you have also the human size. So I decided, of course, that it's more related to the human body than to the surrounding in a way. These 5 sculptures are made by basically 3 different materials. First of all, glazed tiles, which I produce in my studio. So I paint them there and burn them. And then you find also digital prints, and as well as mirror polished stainless steel. I will talk about the digital prints later, but here you can have another view onto the Washington Street, which is a very popular, obviously a very popular photo spot, which I didn't know before actually. And many people come there. And here I like this photo because it actually tells a lot what we wanted to do with this commission, that it activates that it can be used by people, that there is an interaction happening, and also a dialogue with the city and with the people who pass by. For example, also people who don't have a connection to art, for example. And I think it's very important that also somebody like that can develop a relationship with these works. Here is another image where people just use it. And the shapes of the sculptures origin, I think, mostly in the skyline of New York, but also, of course, I always work with kind of geometric shapes, so it wasn't unfamiliar to me. But I thought it's very important that these sculptures have a relation with the viewer, with the city, and also the images you find on them you will see have a relation to New York. This is another view where you see the side with mirrored polished stainless steel, and the Manhattan Bridge is reflecting, and in the middle you would see the Washington Street. Here is another image. As you see, people started interacting with the work immediately. I would like to talk a bit about the imagery on the sculptures, which are mainly, or a big part of them is imagery which is related to New York, mainly to the people of New York. I found them sometimes, some I made by myself, some I found in online archives, and others I would find on eBay or flea markets. And these are combined with photos of antique statues from ancient Rome or ancient Greek time. And I thought it wasn't easy to find images which don't reproduce the cliche of New York, because I think New York is the city which is probably most photographed in the world, or one of the most photographed places. So my decision was to involve a lot of very random parts of the city, like streets or walls or corners, as well as, of course, human beings, but like not just also in a very random way. So I thought also it's good when everybody can relate to these images in a way and recognize himself or herself in that images as well. Here is another, this is also an image from one sculpture. You will see on the bottom that's a person or a diapositive I found on eBay, which was from a family, from a German family who traveled to New York in the 80s. And I ordered that image. So that's another detail. And then that was the short overview of the work in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And now I would like to introduce you for a bit to my past works, because of course there's a relation to it. And this is a very old image. It's from 2004, and it was one of my first kind of solo shows, and the first show I curated, basically. For me, it was always important, and that's why I put it at the beginning, that I had a problem with total neutrality in a space, and I was thinking, how could I change it completely or radically? How can I change the atmosphere of the space when you enter it? And how does art relate to that? And at that time, because I still studied, I had not much possibilities or money. I've chosen aluminium foil and black and white copies to change the space. And then I invited other artists to present the works there. This is the start. And now we continue with more or less the present. That's a show which I've also done this year, this year. And it developed parallel to the Public Art Fund commission. As you can see, it's a very similar approach. You can see also tile sculptures. The big difference is that it's indoor, which is not such a big challenge like an outdoor piece. And it's very high. It goes it's the height of 2 floors, and I was asked to make a site-specific commission for a year there. It's an institution called Palais Populaire in Berlin. And in the background, I made a wallpaper which goes to the basement of the space, as you can see here. This imagery is put together by also photos of Berlin, but also architecture and just street photography and materials I find. Here is the last view on that. And then this is another show I also had last year, or no, this year. It's in Kunsthalle Hamburg, and the new director asked 7 artists to react to the architecture, because it's in Hamburg, it's a very controversial, discussed architecture. As you see, it's all based on a grid. And my decision was to kind of even point the grid out more with tiles and with this mirrored cube. On the floor, you can find some small wooden sculptures. Here, this is a show from last year in the Smart Museum in Chicago, and I also made a site-specific work at the end in the entrance space, which is a very high lobby and has a round kind of ceiling. And I decided to present a wallpaper there as well. which you can see here from frontal. You can see only half of it because you have a small lower ceiling. And on the left side, there is another mirror work. And then you would go into the exhibition space and find a more conventional exhibition, in the sense that I did just show individual works, and I didn't work so much site specifically there. Oh yeah, this is I also wanted to point out a few references for me, or inspirations I had. This is a house in Paris built by an architect called Robert Mallet-Savant in 1927. And he installed in the hallway a mirror piece with a kind of three-dimensional mirrors, or no, they were in a three-dimensional order. And I thought that was very clever because it opened the space completely, and it gave a lot of light into it. And that's how I interpreted it later in a mirror piece I made in 2015 in a group show. So mirror, I think, is a very complicating material because it's very effective and very tempting, and people love it for to shoot themselves, like to make images of photos of themselves in it. But on the other hand, I think it suits me very well when I work with spaces, because it opens up the space, it gives light, and it also catches the movement of the viewer and also the other parts in the space. So I decided to combine this material also with some very simple drawings of mine, as you can see in the thin lines. These are different mirror pieces which kind of create a drawing in itself. This is another work where I also work with reflecting material, but in that way, in a more sculptural way. As you can see, these are three-dimensional sculptures, and they covered with mirroring material. And here is another mirror piece in a show in Düsseldorf. And in this case, I combined it with tiles as well. In that show, I also decided to create some small cabinets for these kind of small works you can see, to give a bit of a structure to the space. As I said before, for me, it's always very important to think the whole environment and space with my work and not think of singular works. But of course, every work has to be the possibility to be on its own as well. This is a show I would like to talk a bit more detailed, because I think it was very important for me, and also it shows well my approach to a space. This is in a gallery, a Marian Beskey gallery in New York, and as you know, a lot of spaces, exhibition spaces, are made to be very neutral, to give the art, of course, as much power or individuality as possible. For me, it's sometimes difficult, because I think I like to react on something which I find, like, let's say, weird plinth, walls, ceilings, whatever. And in this space, you just enter and you see immediately everything. So I decided to use it almost as a stage where the viewer can become part of the stage, or use it as a set design. So you can see to the right a plinth or a table or podest sculpture, whatever, where are little wooden sculptures on top. And then in the middle, there is a cube also covered with stainless steel, mirrored polished. Here is a detail of it. And then this is even a closer detail. The original idea for that show, or kind of reference I had for myself only, was a BBC series I watched in 2016, and this was made in the 1970s already, and it's about the Roman Empire, called I, Claudius. And I just thought it seemed to me so contemporary, and also was the content was so present, like about power, love, moral issues, that I thought this is a kind of a good starting point for that show. And below you see the wallpaper I created for it, including 2 actors of that BBC play, then 2 photos of ancient sculptures, and also photos which I done of contemporary persons. And this is the other side of the gallery, which is quite empty and just very simple, just drawings and small sculptures. Yes, we've seen already quite a few of these small sculptures. That's why I thought I also talk about them quickly. I make drawings, or the initial point was that I was thinking, how could I translate a 2-dimensional drawing into a 3-dimensional shape? And so I made drawings and gave it to somebody who turned it with wood, and then I would paint or draw on them again. In a way, I also think they could represent something like different personalities, or they have different characters as symbols for persons. And this is a reference I also like very much. It's designer from Italy, Ettore Sozzos. I'm sure most people know him. And these are candle holders he designed. Here are a few more of my wooden sculptures. They're not very big. They kind of have sometimes the height of a table. But I would embed them in an installation as well. This is the main issue, like they would become part of a bigger installation. This is also a quite important show for me. That's why I wanted to have chosen it as well for today, because I did not much more than just covering all walls and the ceiling with copies and the walls with digital prints to change the space completely. At the entrance, you would see a mirror reflecting the interior of the space, and just one small thin line of gold leaf. This is another detail of that show. Sometimes for me, the space is actually also a sculpture, which I just use. That you can see another sample of that approach is a show in the Drawing Center in 2010 in New York. And in that case, the whole walls are covered with black and white copies. And these copies the motive of it origins in a scan of transparent paper. And on top of these walls, I would hang drawings of mine. So this is a sample of drawings I did there. It's just very simple lines of gold leaf and pencil drawing. Here is another sample, which I used just images of stairwells because I thought they so incredibly 3-dimensional already and so graphic. that I made a collage of it and used it as a wallpaper. And inside you would see this space, which has the double height as outside, because the roof is higher in that area. So it's almost entering some kind of church or very big exhibition space instead of where much lower space out around it. And here this room I painted black and used also kind of tile paintings for it. This is another reference. It's a music room Wassily Kandinsky created in 1931 for a building exhibition. And he painted the tiles. Yeah, I mean, the focus I had now was on more the architectural work or the installations I had or I made, but I want to point out one more thing which is really important for me. Besides my approach to material and craft and space, I like also to work with the fact of functionality sometimes, or I like to step on the border between use of works on material and fine arts in a way. So this is a kitchen. I didn't design the whole kitchen, but the kitchen block. And this, for example, is a show I made in Nuremberg in 2015, and there you will see this bench all around where people could sit on. And this is a work in the Cleveland Clinic, which is obviously not usable, but it's in a different context than the art context, of course. And this is a last work I want to mention, because I think it's very nice sometimes to also collaborate with different fields of culture, art, or creativity, like music, dance, fashion, design. And so I designed or gave ideas to this fashion presentation at the Paris Fashion Week of Hermes. And as you can see here, now it's used by the models, and the imagery which I created or put together was like from dress rehearsals, but also from the Hermes archive and imagery I found before. So now I think we've reached already almost the end, because I think we had only 30 minutes, and I just want to shortly focus on how we developed the work at Brooklyn Bridge Park. So Katarina Statopoulou asked me around, or contacted me around 2 years ago, and we started a dialogue, and we just thrown ideas into the space. And the first idea I had was like to build a pavilion kind of thing, because I imagined the work will be in a very busy place in Manhattan, and that people could just enter a space and kind of have a contemplation, rest, or just leave the busy world behind them. But of course, we realized, or I realized, it's very difficult, because you have to maintain that completely different. People could live in there or put rubbish in it, and it's just very complicating, I thought. So that was the second idea. And then I came up with this idea of just building a huge wall, which was tiled. But we still thought that this is not the final kind of concept for it. So I started thinking to creating a space, but with 3-dimensional sculptures, but defining a kind of a square space where people could still feel a bit protected or whatever. So this is another kind of constellation. And then I came already closer to like the idea of having a few different sculptures with different materials and still creating like a little plaza or something where people feel kind of not protected is the wrong word, but embedded in it. And as you see, I work a lot with models and drawings. I don't create these works or develop them on the computer. I would still use drawings to, and models, because I think models are very helpful. You can move them on the table, you can walk around it, you can make photos of it. And it's for me much more easy to imagine a space like that. This is then the final sculpture. And here is, for example, a drawing I made. And another drawing. And then this is the final sculpture of that drawing. And yes, a last thing, we made a lot of tests, material tests, of course, because working outdoors is a total different ball game than indoors. You need frost-proof, waterproof materials which can't be damaged easily. So I had to find, or we had to find, a tile company producing these tiles. And this is in my studio, where you can see unfinished tiles and also painted tiles on the left, and then here are the burnt tiles already. I would lay them on the floor and make the final decisions there. So I can plan it, I can make a lot of drawings, but the final decision is then when I see them and move them around a little bit. That's why my studio floor was at one point completely filled with tiles. So yeah, that's me in my studio. And these tiles before shipping to New York. The sculptures were installed in New York together, put together, and I only sent the tiles. The rest was produced in New York, which was great. This is the last sculpture, I think. And then this was the very last thing we did. We had already an idea where to position the sculptures, but of course, it's very important to be at that space and to really move it around a little bit, check which angle is the best. And so gratefully to Walsh Hansen, he built these real size models, and we spent a very pleasant day moving them around at that space. And I think that was very, very important. So this is the last image. It's the Empire State Building at night and the sculpture. So I think I stop it now.
Thank you, Claudia. That was such a treat. I'm very happy that you included the earlier iterations of Rehearsal.
Yeah.
As you and I had discussed, it's very rare that the initial concept an artist comes up with actually materializes into the final artwork when we're talking about public art. And it was a really fascinating experience to work with you on trying to figure out the best way to transform or translate your ideas into what ended up being Rehearsal. So it was a real honor and privilege to work with you on that.
Yeah, from my side too. It made a lot of fun, I must say. And it's so nice to work with a team as well, because a lot of artists work very much on their own in the studio, and it's very nice to sometimes have this experience as well, being in a team.
No, definitely. And we should mention to the audience that, our first in-person meeting was the week before, New York and the world started shutting down because of the pandemic. So we were very fortunate that you were in New York in March 2020. We were able to look at locations at Brooklyn Bridge Park, but it was also a relearning experience, I think, for all of us to basically put this project together virtually. And thankfully you were able to come in July and actually actually install the work. So
Yeah. No, it was a very special experience to create everything virtually, and yeah, it worked well. But if I could choose, I would rather do it or have the possibility to have a few more site visits and stuff. But in that case, it really worked well. So imagination is a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. We of course wish we had been able to have you in New York more, but we're very happy with the outcome as well. So as we just heard you talk about, Rehearsal is a constellation of 5 geometric structures. Each one differs in size and shape from 7 feet tall to 13 feet tall. One thing that I find really intriguing about Rehearsal is that for the first time you combined 3 elements that you've used in your practice before, but never all together. So, you hand painted 1,500 clay tiles in your studio. You included photographs. Some were photographs you yourself took, some were found images, and of course the mirrored polished steel surfaces. So what made you want to combine these 3 elements in your work?
I think, as I mentioned, maybe I'm actually, anyway, I'm very sorry for my English. I would love to express myself better, but you have to live with what I got now.
Your English is excellent, so please don't let that hold you back.
I just feel there's something missing, or I repeat myself very much. No, but I think it was important for me. Tiles, for example, are a material everybody can relate to in a way. So, and of course, outdoors are people passing by, not with persons, because like they go into the park or wherever. And I think tiles are a material which everybody can relate to. And then I involved also mirror, because I thought it catches the movement, it catches the city as well, and it gives a lot of from every side you come, it looks different, totally different. So it was just, I think, very profitable for us to include these 3 materials.
Definitely. And even though you've worked in large-scale installation before, as we saw in your presentation, this is the first time that you worked in large-scale installation outdoors in the public. How was that different for you? How was that experience for you?
I mean, of course, on a purely technical level, it's very challenging, or it's a total different demand than indoors. Of course, you have to consider much more things. It's almost building like a house. I would have never expected that. That you need engineers. The static has to be really solid for storms and whatever. But also, I really like the fact that as you could see on the images, that people relate to it, which would never go into exhibitions, for example. But of course, there are also people who really are art lovers and like it or enjoy it too. I don't want to exclude them, but like, I think it's very nice and important that kind of it's there for everybody. And this is a total different experience which you would have in an exhibition space, like in a museum or a gallery. Yeah, that's what I enjoyed really.
I think that's what you just said is very interesting, and it connects with something that you've said to me before, which is that art is always connected to life. There's no separation between art and where it's shown. So thinking about that concept, let's talk a little bit about the specific location it's presented, the entrance, the Main Street Plaza entrance to Brooklyn Bridge Park, where the work is in dialogue both with the park, Brooklyn Bridge Park, and with the city. So what was significant about that location for you?
Yeah, this location I like very much because it includes 2 different concepts. First of all, the concept of the park, of course, of free time and just pleasure and maybe a lazy afternoon or whatever. And on the other hand, you still have the busy city in the background. So it divides actually, or it's exactly on the border between these two worlds or elements. And this is, I think, was very interesting because I had a bit of difficulties to imagine this work purely on a meadow without the city in the background, at least. I think it needs the dialogue with buildings and with busy people, with life as well. So I was very happy to have this space because it kind of includes both aspects of city life in a way.
Definitely, and that I think ties into the overall interests and direction of your practice, which is this intersection of art, architecture, design, but also craft, and functionality is very important to you, as you mentioned in your talk. And we saw the kitchen island that you've designed, and a lot of times you've incorporated almost like seating within your exhibition spaces. So one element of the rehearsal installation that I wanted to elaborate on is this concept that it alludes to an ancient Roman or an ancient Greek agora, and this meeting spot. Let's talk a bit about more, because I know that was really central to you from the beginning of the inception of rehearsal.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think I find it really fascinating if you think about human history, that so many things are obviously very universal and repeat permanently. And I think it's fascinating that you still have a lot of freak plays in the theater right now, 2,000-3,000 years later, and it's still so present, and it seems so contemporary in a way. And that's why, as I think history obviously moves in circles, I think I like the idea to bring that together in a way. And in the Roman Empire, or also at Greek ancient times, the meeting place played a big role. It was also a place where politics happened, where business happened. Also, it was the central meeting point. That's why I want to refer to that.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's very successful in rehearsal. It's simultaneously a very open space that people can walk through and have vistas of the city and of the park, but at the same time it also feels enclosed and protected, and it also creates a moment of pause in the city. Can you talk a bit about how ideally you wanted people to experience the work, what you want their take to be from it?
Oh, that's difficult, because I in my work I don't want to be didactic, and I don't want to be kind of I'm always very happy if the viewer has its own associations and also its own use of the artwork and its own thoughts. Ideally, I would love if people look very long and stay there very long and just enjoy it, or just sit there or whatever. I'm very open at that point. So I saw also a lot of animals already sitting on it. No, mainly dogs, actually, dog photos.
This ties in with a question that we've received from the audience that I really like, which is, what has surprised you the most about having your work in public? And I think this ties in with the way people interact with it.
Absolutely. So the dog photos really surprised me, but of course, actually, it's not very surprising. There are many dogs in that area. And people made them to sit on two sculptures together, or in the middle of this O-shaped sculpture. But unfortunately, I don't know. I mean, I saw it when it was open only a day, I think. So I can just live from images which some people sent to me.
It's also interesting, you were here in July and now it's November, and just in terms of thinking of how people interact with the works in the different seasons, we're already seeing groupings of Santa Clauses at the installation, which has been very, very, I think, entertaining and surprising for us. So yes, I think they're different, different seasons, different types of people. And I think it also just kind of highlights how much of a melting pot New York is, and how the work really stands at a crossroad where it intersects with, the city, the park, people, residents of Dumbo, tourists, and I think it's all exemplified through your work.
Yeah, I'm curious how it will look like without leaves in the background when the tree's changing. I think you see probably much more of Manhattan, I guess.
Mm-hmm. You'll have to come in January to see it. Oh. Another question I wanted to address for the audience is the title of the work, because what you and I have discussed is that you're very interested and inspired by theater and also theatrical sets. So how did you come up with Rehearsal? What does that mean to you?
I just think it implies a kind of openness, which I like, that meaning it's not finished, or finished in the sense of construction, of course, but not finished in the sense of use of it. And I think, or I hope, that this title invites to interaction, or interact with the works. And I like the idea that that it could be some stage or setting as well. Mm-hmm. And ideally, I would love to invite maybe a dance group or musicians at the end of the show in April to do something there, or to rehearse in there as well.
Definitely. To transition to some questions from the audience, because we have about 5 minutes left. There's a question specifically about the imagery that you're using in your work. One of our audience members mentions that she's noticed that sometimes you use images that repeat, that are, appear in one work and then potentially in another one. Is there a specific reason for that?
No, but I think some images are very important to me, and they also represent the content very well. Which first of all, the imagery. My main goal is, even if you can see a lot of narratives in it, is to be a good painting. Is the wrong word, of course, but like a collage, which works visually very well, in sense of kind of composition and construction of it. And then there are certain images, like a woman's head, for example. This stands for me like really representative for the Roman Empire, for example. That's why I sometimes use it again, but it's not like a concept that I want to refer to my own other shows or whatever. And also there are, I must say, it's not super easy to find as this specific image, because that's very important to me. I can't use just any image of something. It has to have a really photographic quality to me. And what I like about the imagery as well, I often use images somebody else makes, of course. So I kind of borrow or lend. I lend the view of somebody else. Like I did also on the sculptures in New York, that I suddenly have these photos of a family which traveled to New York in the 80s. And I'm very happy to work with that, with this different point of view as well, and to include it in my work.
That was a very fascinating decision on your part, I found, to include photographs that were taken by German tourists. So it has the outsider's view of New York in the 80s and 90s. Can you talk more specifically about what those images that you included are, just because not everyone has had the opportunity to see the work? in person?
Yeah, I'm sorry because we had not so much time that's why I wasn't so detailed on everything. But the images, yeah, of on the sculptures, I said some I found on eBay. That was a family trip from a German family in the 80s and 90s. Some of them I made years ago in New York as well, because I had not the chance to come back to make more photos, but which was good, I think, because then I just used what was there. And then also I used material from archives. So it was a combination, but they all related to New York except the photos of the ancient sculptures.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've received another question for the from the audience, which is, when you saw Rehearsal in person, as we discussed, you had been working on a maquette models in your studios and weren't able to come for site visits aside from the beginning and when you came for installation. So what surprised you the most when you saw your artwork finally up, installed in Brooklyn Bridge Park?
I think what surprised me most was the massivity. Do you say that? The massive Manhattan Bridge. It's so huge that everything looks so small in a way. This was, I mean, of course I had photos of it, but to stand below this bridge and hear the sound of it, and this was something I wouldn't have expected in that way. But I must say, all other aspects, I think I could imagine quite well. I wasn't so terribly surprised by other things.
I would have to say the same, that even though I visited the site multiple times, the train passing over the Manhattan Bridge was something that the effect of that I couldn't have anticipated. It almost becomes part of the soundtrack of the installation.
Very loud. Yeah.
Very loud, but also it just heightens the need for a moment of pause, relaxation, meditation, a space to contemplate, a space to connect. It just highlights the fact of how busy and bustling New York City is, and how we as citizens, as visitors to New York, really need that moment to pause and experience our surroundings.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, what I really like about this spot and New York in general is it's a city of so many different layers, which you can't imagine even, like, and specifically on that spot, you have all these layers together somehow. Because of, as I said before, this kind of park situation where you rest and have spent free time, then you have this train above you, then you have the skyline in the back, and then you have behind you also old warehouses and many tourists, of course. It's unbelievable in a way, yeah, especially coming from Berlin.
I think that's a perfect note to end this talk with you, Claudia. We're so thrilled that we were able to do this today, and thank you. I know it's evening in Berlin, but thank you for taking the time to connect with us again. And for anyone who hasn't seen the installation, it's on view until April 18th in Brooklyn Bridge Park, and you can find out more information about Rehearsal on publicartfund.org in our exhibition center section. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Special thanks to Claudia and for Lucy.
Thank you for joining today. Have a good day or good evening, whatever.
Sounds lovely. Bye, Claudia.
Bye.